So tool that I'm going to talk about, I'm Louise. Not the Louise that's been mentioned a few times, she's back there, talk later. So is feedback by audio and video. So the main idea that this was trying to address, the main issues that to get success, what we were hoping for, was that students would feel that they were not receiving adequate or prompt and detailed feedback. The assessments were not helping students to learn where they were falling behind or getting to really understand if they were getting on okay. And then large class sizes were very difficult to get prompt feedback back. So it was quite time consuming to get that detailed and prompt feedback to those large sizes. So the idea was to look at how, by using the audio or visual feedback, how that could improve the situation. So this was looked at through five different areas. So you've got again, as always, the hospitality management cover a good portion of that, and then obviously civil and structural for myself, and biological and health services for Greg. So Greg was the only one of us who used a video of sorts, so he did a screen capture talking through the question and how it should have been answered and what maybe the common mistakes were. Zini used a program called Kaizena, which is used to add on to Google Docs, and that allows you to have a bank of audio clips if you wanted to respond to a reference and you said the same thing all the time, you could record that and you could bring it in for each time you needed to address that comment. And you could do obviously longer individual feedback, but it had this option of doing this, building in little chunks of feedback, which is obviously more advantageous for larger group sizes. Anne and Louise both looked at a voice recorder app, and they both did individual feedback for each. For Louise, it was for groups, and for Anne, it was individual people. So they found that quite good, but it was just the app itself that they used. Myself, I looked at Brightspace, trying to see how it worked in it, because it has a functionality for adding audio to the systems. You're able to do an audio clip at the end and do an overall individual feedback, but you're also allowed to insert stuff, if anyone's looked at Brightspace yet, and in that you can add small, like with the Kaizena, you can do small clips for various statements that you want to add. So the main positives, the comments that came through was, okay, so more of this please, answers are better explained verbally, visual aided, and can be referenced back if you want to see it again. Effective way of providing feedback that is easily understood. It feels personal to each student, and should be used in other modules as well, and really useful and makes the feedback more easy to understand. So I think the general consensus was that hearing it verbally was obviously going to be positive. We all kind of knew that. It's a step for most people to take. They don't. For me personally, I'm a fairly fast typist, but I stumble on words. So doing the audio is a bit of a challenge for me, because I know I'm going to have to do a few takes, because I will get tongue-tied. So but overall they liked it. They did generally the video ones where there was a step-by-step something to look at when they were doing it seemed to be very positive, and most of the comments that was related to that module loved that video element of it. Some of the negatives, so we specifically didn't force people to choose a particular tool. We wanted people to choose what they were most comfortable with, because it was a step out from our comfort zone for most of us. So we wanted people to choose what felt right for them. Because of that, there wasn't any support for what to use or how to use it. So there was a bit of a learning curve in getting things set up. And most of the content that was used was all freeware stuff. So there was it was all online, and it was just that little bit of hard time to get used to. But going forward, I think most people would know that now, and they'd be quicker using it again. The Kaizena, I think, generally was liked by Zini, but the problem was it is limited to an add-on to Google Docs. So your students must submit via Google Docs. So they must share their Google Doc with you, which limits maybe how you process the whole situation. Your approach to your assignment and assessment would have to change to allow that process to take place. The bit of a learning curve to get good quality, I know for myself, in one of the clips I was doing, it took me about half an hour to be happy with like 2 sentences, because it was just making sure there wasn't too much background noise, and making sure the volume was right. I have a mic and I've done videos, so I wanted to make sure that everything was right. So sometimes some of the comments were that it was too quiet and it was hard to understand at times, but that I think is just a learning curve and getting the settings right. And I think next time around most of the lecturers doing that will be far more comfortable with that. The voice only doesn't always do it for me. I need visual support. I don't think most of us want to sit there and have ourselves recorded talking about feedback. So where there is a video screen capture possible, that would probably be advantageous. But otherwise, I don't think many of us will stand there looking at a camera going, you did this wrong, you know. I think that's natural for most of us. Would be better with video feedback to also see where it went wrong. So they want to visually see you sort of maybe circling the page and saying this is where you went wrong, and what areas kind of dropping down the marks. But the consensus generally was fairly high marks. So this is the statements. In the student survey, they were asked to strongly agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree to these statements. And these were the overall positive statements. So you have 78% would like to see this tool used in other modules. I think that's a fairly good indicator. If they actually would like to see it used again and across all modules, I think that's quite good. Obviously, we love the fact that it helped me with future assignment assessments. I enjoyed using the tool. Obviously, they only had to press play; they didn't have to read, so that's always good. The tool helped me to understand the subject matter, and I think that's probably a little bit more specific. I'd say the way Greg approached it by going through the screen capture and going through the question that was asked and the solution step by step on where mistakes went wrong, I think probably that helped in that area. And then the low percentage, obviously, these are the people who it was a negative statement, so the low marks are good. But they felt only 16% felt it had no benefit of the study, and 11% felt the tool was not effectively delivered. So the last one, that 11%, hopefully over the coming next year, if people were to reuse it, that would reduce even further. That it is just a learning curve. A couple of them, I think most of them that used it would look to use this again. And then some of the maybe less positive outcomes. So only 78% of the people said that the tool made them more engaged with the module. Now 30% were neutral, so at least it was still more positive than negative, but it still wasn't as high as you might like. And then 47% said the tool made me more motivated to study. I'm not sure many of the tools will get that to be in the 90s. We'll dream someday that we can get that up that high, but it's not going to get, I think that's hard to get motivated. But overall, the general consensus was that they like the audio. They like being able to hear the statements. And I think you can address it in such a way that the tone doesn't sound as judgmental as maybe words do, which I think is always good. Maybe take breaks between when you're doing your assessments, because they might sound more judgmental as you go through your 100 assessments. But generally, the students in Word, same as emails, when we write emails, the tone is lost. So in the use of audio, you get the tone. You're like, oh, well, you made that mistake, but don't worry, whatever it is, it can be a little bit more personal. And most of the time they found it personal. Even with the generic ones, they still felt it was still talking to them. So I think it's a very good tool. I think most of us will use it again. Okay.